Hey everyone, if you're watching this video, it may perhaps be the last video I ever make.
FBI, open up!
Speaking to you from prison, I received an email from a company called JMachen. I've literally never seen or heard this company before, however what their email said, after verifying that they were a real company, was very intriguing to me. They made promises of producing consoles, game drives, and more. Looking through their product stack on AliExpress, they have everything from SD cards loaded with ROMs and Batocera to mini PCs loaded with Windows and ROMs. I know this market and type of product is nothing new, however it is just something I haven't really delved into since the Action Replay days, getting cheats and ROMs that way. Fast forward 2 decades now, we have entire 2 terabyte hard drives full of ROMs and preloaded software all programmed ready to go. Today we're taking a look at the Hyperbase LBox, which runs the LaunchBox system, and then they also sent over the 256GB SD card with Batocera preloaded onto it, which you have to boot into. The one that may have killed my SD reader, but we'll address that later. Getting into their packaging, it is very basic and obviously a multi-use box. It included a hard drive, a USB 3.0 data cable, a very nice SD card case holding the aforementioned card. The company also supplied 2 controllers, and we can see clearly where they got their influence from. They're nothing special to be honest, however they would come in great for older party games, you know, giving your little brother the Player 2 controller vibes. I played with it for a little bit, it didn't seem awful. They are wireless with a USB receiver. Don't get me wrong, I would never play a modern game with these controllers, or even a more precise platforming game like Super Mario Sunshine. In a pinch, they do what they're supposed to do. Aside from that, there's not much else to speak of in the way of packaging. It was thoughtfully wrapped and packaged when I originally got it, and the hard drive was not loose in the packaging. Now, before getting into what's included on these devices, I'll speak about the elephant in the room. I can almost guarantee these games were not legally obtained by the company, especially getting into more modern stuff. But now the Video Game History Foundation classifies a game made before 2010 as a classic, as that's when the digital game sales of media and everything started to take off more so. I'll link their study and facts in the description. Now, while knowing that, as per their study, 87% of classic games are not in release, meaning you have no way of legally accessing them, other than if you already own it, purchase it secondhand, or if you're given a gracious re-release by whomever owns the rights to it at this point. Libraries are allowed to digitally preserve games, but not digitally share them in the US, unlike books and films. Now, as a consumer, where does that leave you? You either try to track down a copy of your beloved childhood game, as well as a system to play it on. Now you're talking about getting into working controllers, and the costs just add up dramatically to play 1 or 2 of your games that you wanted to play. I own a few retro games that are important to me, and the consoles they belong to. However, I couldn't tell you the last time I actually set any of them up to play those games. Your other option to play the games is to pirate them, which for some people is cool. Just do what you do, own it, and just understand any potential ramifications from it wherever you may reside. Other people, such as the ones that are getting into retro gaming for the first time and don't know much about emulation, maybe they read about needing things called ROMs, but they have no idea where to look or where to go, because no one will tell them in fear of getting booted off their platform or form or whatever. So they're left to figure it out all on their own, potentially doing ill will and damage on their device, trying to sift through the usually click ad rampant friggin' ROM sites, right? And then lastly, there's the staunch believers that will not and have not ever downloaded a ROM, to which I say good. Ideally, that is how everyone should operate. However, due to the limited access to more obscure games, and even sometimes popular ones, on their original hardware or even digitally, sometimes piracy is the only way in their region or situation. I'm not one to judge people for doing what they feel is right in their world. I have a sneaking suspicion that people from third world countries and even up and coming countries would likely have a ridiculously hard time finding good working OEM hardware and games. Heck, I'm sure even in places like the Middle East or even Hawaii would have limited access to mainland supply of these things. Like where I am, I can go to any given pawn shop and likely find what I'm looking for at a crazy exaggerated price. Typically the games and the consoles. Consoles are fairly priced, but the games are a little bit more on the expensive side. If you're interested in any of this, there is a lot of good information in the article, again provided in the description. As well, I will link 2 videos from The Completionist, one of which he buys all digital games before the eShop closure, and the other he speaks more in depth about the video game preservation as a whole and the video game foundation, preservation foundation. They are very interesting and worth a watch. Now with all that out of the way, let's dive into the actual software. When first plugging in the LBox, it will pop up with a few folders, one of which says Install Me First, LaunchBox, and a user manual. I scanned all these folders and files of Microsoft Defender as well as Windows Malware Removal Tool. They found no threats at all. Now I personally did not run any of the programs in the Install Me folder. These are various Microsoft drivers here. I only launched the LaunchBox app. When I first got this in for review, I was working on some other sponsored stuff, so I didn't have time to get to it immediately. Instead, I handed it to my wife, who's completely illiterate when it comes to any of this stuff. She doesn't even know what zip means in terms of unzipping a folder or a file. She can do basic processing and web-based apps for her programs, however that's it. She honestly is the target audience for this type of product. Someone who has no idea what a ROM is.
I look like I know what a JPEG is.
So she's a gamer in the sense that she owned a GameCube growing up and loved to play Luigi's Mansion, Mario Kart Double Dash, and Super Mario Sunshine. I gave her the hard drive and told her to use it on her computer to try and figure out how to operate it, with telling her not to do the install folder. She was able to plug in her controller, which did seem to pick up and just automatically work. She obviously knew that the game she wanted to play was on GameCube, which was neatly laid out on the left-hand side. After clicking on that and scrolling through the expansive games list, she found Super Mario Sunshine and was able to load it up and play it without issue. Now after she got into the game, I went in and turned up the resolution scaling up to 4K in the Dolphin Emulator app, which was used to emulate the game. Which brings me to my next point. This still is not an infallible device and cannot be a reliable grab-and-go device for a complete newcomer. It will always help to have some working knowledge as well as being comfortable navigating custom OS or programs. This device is an absolute godsend for myself. Even though I know how to set up everything and how to obtain games both legally and illegally, it can still be tedious. So even with software like LaunchBox, Batocera, and more, it is just tedious, especially setting up on a brand new device or after a system wipe. So as such, I now have a 2 terabyte hard drive full of every game I could ever wish to test and emulation, as well as a convenient way to add more of my own and take that wherever I please. I already stored my game files on a local NAS type server, which is convenient and works just as well, but having a plug and play solution is fantastic. I can't get over the convenience factor of it all. There are risks to these devices. If they are the type of company to offer these types of products, perhaps they have good intentions going in, or perhaps they're the type of person who would load on malicious software as well as the ill-obtained games. Again, you can protect yourself from this by running antivirus software, making sure you're scanning these things as you're doing it, and when you're downloading any kind of fishy type of product online. Which brings me to my next point. In LaunchBox, you'll see that they have games from PS4 and Windows. These are not PS4 games, however, as PS4 emulation is trash. Instead, they are PC versions of the games, because all these came to PC as well. You'll find games such as Spider-Man, God of War, Resident Evil 2, all the way to indie games, to which they are the ones I feel the worst for in this situation. It is one thing to pirate a game from a naughty EA, whoever the most hated company this week is, but to pirate from the people who made Tunic or Hades is an unfortunate thing. As such, I would not recommend that you play these PC titles this way. I would delete them to clear up more space and throw on more classic games, as there is a lot to be desired here. They obviously don't have all the game consoles on here, or all the games. However, it is easy to add more through the LaunchBox intuitive design. Bringing it back to tinkering for my wife, if you already know how to do all these emulator tweaks and game-specific fixes, or at least have the knowledge or knowledge on where to find a solution, great. For people like my wife, it would be a seamless plug-and-play experience most of the time. However, she would not be maximizing her visual experience or sometimes even control experience, as she has no idea how to do any changes related to that. If she came across a game that didn't work or play well, she just would move on to a different one or just not play it entirely. Again, having some skill level will help here. With over 1,000 games on the LBox, it is quite the force to be reckoned with. At the price of $97.99 US, not including the $10 off coupon that I found on AliExpress, you have 2 terabytes of hard drive for the cost of about $30 to $40 more than an empty drive, from a reputable brand. If you have the time, know-how, and resources to do all of this on your own, I would suggest that you buy a cheap hard drive and get to work recreating this device, as it's not hard to do. The hardest part is obviously acquiring all the classic games. However, if you have a loose knowledge or are motivated to learn about emulation, this is a fantastic solution and stepping point to creating your own library of classic games. All that stands in the way is your moral compass. Now, moving over to the SD card this sent over, it is very similar to the LBox, with the exception of needing to boot into your BIOS on the Steam Deck or ROG Ally, as it runs Batocera, which is a retro gaming distro of Linux. It operates solely on the card. You can plug this card into a Windows or Linux desktop environment and pull the games off there if you desire, which leading me to my next point, this card being literally too hot to handle. The moment I put this card in my ROG Ally, it started acting crazy. Windows slowed down to a crawl. If I tried to operate anything within the Explorer system, it would freeze and just hang there. At first, I assumed this was because the SD card was formatted to something that didn't play nice with the Ally. However, I tested the card in my Steam Deck and it worked perfectly. I then plugged it into my desktop and it did the same thing there. Working perfectly, I mean. After plugging the SD card in via USB-C adapter, I was able to boot into the and access the SD card with no issues on my ROG Ally. Now, after looking further into all of this, this appears to be a symptom of a dying card reader. However, in my case, all my other SD cards work at full speed, no problem. I have even run speed tests and stress tests on them through the Ally with no issue. I have brands from Team Group, Lexar, Samsung, some cheap no-name brand, as well as another SanDisk that work no problem. I've tried to format the card on and off the device, which I'm not able to do on the device because the system will not allow me to move into that program to do it. I've tried other suggested tricks to no avail. However, I'm still not entirely convinced my SD card reader is dead or dying, due to the fact that I can play any other game off it that I want to with any other SD card I have. So this is very perplexing. I'm not about to make a claim that all SanDisk cards are bad. Clearly that's not the case. However, there are other reports out there of common brands being failing ones, with SanDisk being one from what I found on the Ally Discord and Reddit. Some people's 1TB SanDisk Extremes will work, but not their lower end ones. The same can be said for reports on Samsung as well. So I just don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Should I be thinking about RMAing my device for a faulty card reader? I just don't know at this point. Bringing it back to the SD card overall, this is a great dual boot option for the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally, if it works in yours, as the Batocera interface is pretty clean and thoughtfully laid out in my opinion. It has all the major games as well. There is a 512GB option with even more. The price on AliExpress right now is about $37, and the price of the same drive is about $20 on Amazon. Some other brands come in cheaper or more expensive. Again, it is cheaper to do it yourself, but if you don't have the time or patience, it is a solid choice. Something I found also in their promotion material was that they will give you access to their ROMs list, and you're able to access even more over the internet. I have no idea how this works, as again, they did not specify or even let me know about it, So take it with a huge grain of salt, especially within the legality sense. At the end of the day, should you buy one of these? Yes and no. Yes, if you're the person who would have gotten these games themselves anyway, but would rather have the work done for them. No, if you are the person who is dead set against piracy. Yes, if you are the person who is aware of piracy issues, but at the same time would love to be able to play their beloved classics they cannot access otherwise. And no, it's not for the type of person if you have absolutely no knowledge nor willingness to learn more about retro game emulation. It can be tricky at times, however there are a plethora of guides out there detailing exactly how to do all of this, typically minus the acquiring games part. If you're even the least bit savvy with a computer, you shouldn't have a problem being able to navigate the LaunchBox or Batocera front ends. Nor should you have any problems following a well-detailed guide on how to set up this all, which unfortunately this video is not. I will be working on a home server ROM setup and how I store all of my games video. Somebody was asking, so I figure I would make a useful video for that. In conclusion, this is a very much controversial product, especially with the inclusion of a certain recent released title a lot of people have been mentioning. If it only contained classic games, I would have no problem recommending this as it's within my comfort level. However, I can't go around recommending people go and support piracy as it's not in line with everyone's views, especially for those recently released titles. As such, JMachen has no idea of this, but they did offer a commission deal based on roughly 8 to 10% of sales generated, which is fantastic. I would have taken that and just put it directly back into the channel. However, the funds gained could be conceived as ill-gotten. Typically, I don't really care what other people think about me as a person, nor what they believe is right or wrong when it comes to my choices. But seeing as my crusty lack of soul still does have a sweet spot for dogs, I've decided that any and all commission earned off of this will be donated to a local dog rescue agency that I work with very closely. I will not give out the name of the rescue, as that would basically dox myself. In lieu of that, I can show you some of the foster dogs I've taken care of in the past and present. Currently, I have a 7-month-old guy who was hit by a car and left for dead. Luckily, he was found and rescued and brought into our care. He was about, I think about 6 to 8 weeks at that point. He unfortunately had to have his rear leg amputated, and after a long recovery, he is now thriving and ready for adoption. Any funds generated from this would go towards paying vet bills, supplying food medication, and anything under the sun related to the welfare of dogs. Something I think most everyone can agree on, no matter which side of piracy you sit on. For a point of reference, I believe this guy's care has cost upwards of $10,000. A lot of these dogs come from terrible environments and are strays that are hunted and killed, all in Canada. Not even from a country that would be remotely close to being described as third world. Sorry to babble on about this, but it is just one of the few things that I hold near and dear to my heart. If you took the time to make it this far, here are some more photos of cute dogs that have been rescued. If it's something you're interested in yourself, honestly check out local foster-based dog rescues in your area. A lot of them will operate with overseas dogs. However, there are plenty of places in the States that are overrun with kill shelters, and the rescues will go and save them as well. For instance, even though we're in Canada, we have rescued dogs from kill shelters in Texas in a joint effort with other rescues. Again, sorry to babble. Now I'm starting to feel like a Sarah McLachlan commercial at this point. On that note, I hope everyone has a great day.